I knew I was finished the moment the new CEO walked in and said, "We are doing a vibe audit." 11 minutes later, he signed my release papers right before the critical checkpoint where the entire system required my biometric authentication to run. I did not scream or beg. I simply smiled and let him trigger a collapse he could not comprehend. If you have ever been judged by energy instead of performance, you will want to hear this. My name is Daisy Wright. I am 39 years old, and for the last 7 years, I have been the National Director of Inventory Operations at Iron Hollow Supply Group. My job does not involve inspiring people. My job involves ensuring that 40,000 shipping containers of industrial steel, automotive parts, and raw resin get from point A to point B without vanishing into the ether. I deal in hard assets, cold logistics, and the unglamorous reality of friction coefficients. I am the person you call when a hurricane hits the Gulf Coast and you need to reroute 20 tons of copper wire before the floodwaters rise. I am practical, I am expensive, and until 12 minutes ago, I was essential. But at Iron Hollow, essential had recently been redefined. The shift happened 6 weeks ago when the board brought in Evan Larkin. Evan is 33 years old, wears sneakers that cost more than my mortgage payment, and speaks exclusively in LinkedIn buzzwords. He did not come from logistics. He came from a tech startup that sold an app for mindful dog walking, or something equally useless to the gross domestic product. He was brought in to disrupt us. Apparently, moving physical goods across the continental United States was too archaic. Evan wanted to move feelings. The first thing Evan did was demolish the executive conference room. He claimed the mahogany table was a symbol of hierarchical oppression. He replaced it with a circle of beanbag chairs and a whiteboard wall that simply said, "Synergy" in neon green marker. He renamed the break room the Collab Lounge and replaced the industrial coffee machine, the one that kept the night shift drivers alive, with a kombucha tap that nobody knew how to use. Then came the culture coach. Her name was irrelevant, but she walked around the warehouse floor with an iPad, grading my forklift drivers on their aura. Last Tuesday, she told my shift supervisor, a 50-year-old man named Frank who has a bad back and 3 kids in college, that his energy was blocking the flow of abundance. Frank looks at spreadsheets of palletized freight all day. The only flow he cares about is the inventory turnover ratio. When I told Evan that his coach was distracting my team during peak shipping hours, he looked at me with deep, performative pity and said I needed to open my heart to the new frequency. I should have known then that I was dead in the water. The summons came via a calendar invite titled Touch Base Alignment Vibe. No agenda, no attachment, just a location, the glass box. That was Evan's office. He had removed the blinds because transparency is our currency. I walked in at 2:42 in the afternoon. I remember the time precisely because my internal clock is synced to the logistics of the entire eastern seaboard. At 2:45, the shift change happens in Atlanta. At 3 o'clock, the most critical automated process in the company executes. Evan was sitting on a yoga ball behind a desk made of reclaimed driftwood. He did not ask me to sit. He stood up, walked around the desk, and leaned against the edge, crossing his arms in a way that was meant to look casual, but was actually studied aggression. "Daisy," he started, his voice dropping an octave to that serious podcast host register. "We need to have a hard conversation, a brave conversation." I stood still, hands clasped behind my back. "I am listening, Evan." "I have been looking at the heat maps from the culture coach," he said, gesturing vaguely to the air as if the data were floating around us. "And I have to be honest with you, your sector is dark. It is heavy. It feels stuck." "My sector is running at 99.8% efficiency," I said, my voice flat. "We cleared the backlog from the port strike in 4 days. Customer satisfaction on delivery times is at an all-time high." Evan sighed, shaking his head, as if I had just admitted to kicking a puppy. "See, that is exactly the problem. Daisy, you are talking about metrics. I am talking about the soul of the company. You are focusing on what? I need you to focus on the why." The reason is that we are a logistics company. Evan, if we do not move the boxes, the clients sue us. He winced. He physically winced at the word sue. That is such a scarcity mindset. We are pivoting. We are going to be a platform for connection. And frankly, Daisy, you are too legacy. You represent the old iron hollow, the command and control style, the walls, the silos. When you walk into a room, the air gets heavy, people feel judged. People feel held accountable, I corrected. Exact same thing, he shot back, smiling that shark-like smile. We are doing a vibe audit across leadership, and you simply do not pass the check. You are an energy vampire. Daisy, you drain the innovation right out of the room. I stared at him. I looked at this man who had never negotiated a union contract, never stood on a loading dock at 4 a.m. in freezing rain, and never had to explain to a bank why our assets dropped in value. He thought he was firing a middle manager who refused to use emojis in email subject lines. He had absolutely no idea that he was looking at the human kill switch for the company's financial existence. He did not know about the legacy bridge. Iron Hollow's warehouse management system and transportation management system were modern on the surface shiny dashboards that Evan loved to look at on his iPad. But the deep architecture, the code that actually verified that a physical pallet existed and assigned it a dollar value, ran on a 12-year-old server cluster that we kept alive with duct tape and prayers, to prevent fraud, to ensure that nobody could inflate our inventory numbers to get a bigger loan. The system required a daily handshake. It required a root-level override authorization. Specifically, my root-level authorization. Every single day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the system compiled a daily collateral publish. It scanned our $1.4 billion in inventory, verified it against the shipping manifests, and sent a certified, encrypted file to our lending consortium. This file was the only reason the bank kept our revolving credit line of $600 million open. If that file did not send, or if it was sent without a certified digital signature, the bank's algorithm would assume we were cooking the books. So, Evan continued, sliding a single sheet of paper across the driftwood desk, we are releasing you, effective immediately. I looked at the paper. It was not a termination notice. It was titled, Transition Agreement. Release, I repeated. Not fired. We do not fire people, Evan said, placing a hand on his chest. We release them to find their true north. We are giving you 30 minutes to gather your personal items. Security will escort you, just to keep the energy neutral. No hard feelings, right? It is just a mismatch of vibes. I looked at my watch. It was 2:49 in the afternoon. 11 minutes. If I argued, he would call security immediately. If I screamed, I would be the hysterical older woman he already thought I was. If I tried to explain the technical dependency, that the entire financial structure of the company relied on my biometric fingerprint hitting the enter key in 11 minutes, he would laugh. He would tell me that the tech guys handle that. He would tell me that everything is cloud native now. He did not know that the tech guys, the ones who actually understood the COBOL mainframe code beneath the cloud, had all quit 3 weeks ago when he replaced their private offices with a hot desking pit. The only person left with the clearance and the knowledge to authorize the daily collateral publish was me. I picked up the paper. It felt light. You are right, Evan, I said, allowing a small, tight smile to touch my lips. I have been feeling very heavy lately. Maybe I do need to be released. Evan brightened. He looked relieved. He thought he had successfully navigated a difficult human interaction using his superior emotional intelligence. I am so glad you see it that way. Daisy. Really? This is a growth moment for you. I am sure it will be a growth moment for everyone, I said. I turned to leave, but stopped at the glass door. My hand hovered over the handle. Evan, just one thing, I said, keeping my voice conversational. The daily sync, the big data push, you know the one I handle. Oh, do not worry about that. He waved a hand dismissively. We have the new dashboard, the automated one. It is all visualized in real time. I told the IT team to just bypass the old manual checks. We trust our data, right? Trust is the new verification. My heart hammered a slow, cold rhythm against my ribs. He had told them to bypass the checks. He had no idea that the manual check he was referring to was a federal banking requirement for asset-backed lending. He thought it was just me being bureaucratic. He had effectively ordered the system to stop certifying our collateral. "Okay," I said. "Good luck with the vibe audit, Evan." "Namaste, Daisy," he said. I walked out of the glass box. I walked past the beanbag chairs. I walked past the culture coach who was pinning a Monday motivation quote to the wall. I did not run. I did not panic. I walked straight to my desk, picked up my purse, and left my laptop closed. I did not need to delete any files. I did not need to plant a virus. I did not need to do anything malicious. All I had to do was not be there. The time was 2:52 in the afternoon. The system was waiting for my fingerprint. The $600 million credit line was hanging by a thread, and the man in the glass office was drinking kombucha, thinking he had just cleared the air. He had cleared the air. All right, he had cleared it for the perfect storm. My corporate phone went black before I even reached the door handle of the glass office. It was a small detail, but efficient. Evan Larkin might not have known how our inventory servers communicated with the custodial banks, but he certainly knew how to automate an IT lockout. My email, my Slack access, my calendar wiped in the nanosecond he had clicked confirm on his iPad. I looked down at the screen. A generic notification simply read, "Device provisioning error. Contact administrator." I turned back to him. Evan was already looking at his phone, likely tweeting something vague and inspirational about the necessity of pruning to encourage new growth. "Evan," I said. My voice was calm, which I think unsettled him more than if I had started throwing the beanbag chairs. He looked up, blinking. "Daisy, I thought we said our goodbyes. Remember, closure is a practice, not a destination. You have 12 minutes, I said. He tilted his head, smiling that condescending, pitying smile. 12 minutes for what I told you. Take 30, take an hour if you need to gather your things. We are not monsters. We want you to transition with dignity. You have 12 minutes before the system thinks there is an intrusion, I clarified. The 3 o'clock handshake, it is not automated in the way you think it is. It requires a biometric verification from a localized terminal, my terminal. If it does not get a thumbprint from a registered officer of operations, it goes into defensive lockdown. Evan laughed. It was a light, airy sound, like someone popping bubble wrap. Oh, Daisy, you really need to let go of this narrative. I spoke to the new CTO this morning. He told me everything is cloud native now. We are serverless. We are agile. The system does not need a thumbprint to run a script. That is something from a spy movie. The interface is cloud native, I said, speaking slowly, as if explaining gravity to a toddler who was about to jump off a roof. The database that holds the collateral certification is a legacy mainframe that the cloud interface talks to. It does not trust the cloud. It only trusts the root user. That is me. Evan sighed and picked up his kombucha. I appreciate your concern. Really, it shows you care. But we have moved past gatekeepers. We are democratizing the data. Please, go pack your box. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I stood there for 3 seconds. I could have explained the covenant protocols. I could have drawn him a diagram of how the bank's API would react when it received a null response instead of a certified hash. I could have told him that democratizing data in a secured lending environment is another word for breach of contract. But I looked at his face smooth, unlined, and utterly confident in his own ignorance, and I realized he would not believe me if I showed him the code itself. To him, technology was magic that just worked. He had never seen the wires. Okay, I said. Goodbye, Evan. I walked out. The outer office, the area Evan now called the Innovation Hub, was quiet. It was an open-plan hellscape of low tables and acoustic felt panels. The news of my release had evidently traveled faster than light. That is the one thing corporate efficiency actually excels at: gossip. Heads were bowed low over laptops. The younger analysts, kids fresh out of supply chain programs who I had trained to spot a routing error from a mile away, refused to make eye contact. They looked like they had just witnessed a shipwreck and were trying not to drown in the wake. They knew. They did not know what exactly was about to happen, but they knew you did not fire the woman who kept the lights on in the middle of a Tuesday shift without consequences. I reached my desk. It was already alien. My monitor was dark. My login was disabled. I did not have much to pack. I am not the type of person who keeps framed photos of cats or a collection of Funko Pops at work. I opened the bottom drawer and took out my personal items: a bottle of ibuprofen, a spare pair of reading glasses, and a stress ball shaped like a shipping container that a vendor had given me 10 years ago. I left the binders. I left the operational manuals I had written. I left the emergency contact list taped to the side of my monitor. If Evan wanted a fresh start, he could have it completely blank. I looked at the wall clock. 2:52, 8 minutes. I walked toward the elevators. The silence in the room was physical. A heavy blanket of avoidance. I could feel their relief that it was me and not them, mixed with the terrifying realization that if it could be me, it could absolutely be them. I reached the lobby. The security desk was manned by Ray Caldwell. Ray was 62. A former Marine who took his job more seriously than the entire executive board combined. He knew the license plate of every employee and the name of every night shift driver. Ray looked at the small cardboard box in my hands. Then he looked at my face. His expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He knew the rhythm of the building. He knew that directors of operations did not leave with a box at 2:55 in the afternoon unless something was broken. "Heading out early, Ms. Wright?" Ray asked. His voice was rough, gravelly. "Early retirement, Ray," I said. "Effective immediately." Ray's jaw tightened. He glanced at the elevator bank where I had just come from, then back to me. He did not ask questions. He knew better, but I saw his hand drift toward the landline on his desk, the one that connected directly to the facility manager. "Ray," I said softly. He stopped. "You might want to order dinner early tonight," I said, "and maybe tell the night crew to bring extra coffee. It is going to be a long one." Ray held my gaze for a long moment. He understood the translation. He knew I was not talking about food. I was telling him to batten down the hatches. "I will keep that in mind. Ms. Wright," he said. He pressed the button to unlock the turnstile. "You take care of yourself. You too." "Ray." I walked out into the heat of the parking lot. The sun was blinding. It was a beautiful, clear Tuesday in July. It felt offensive. The world should have been gray and storming to match the disaster that was counting down inside the server room. But instead, birds were singing. I got into my car, a 4-year-old sedan that was practical and paid off. The leather seats were burning hot. I threw the box onto the passenger seat and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I pulled out my personal phone. I had 2 apps on it that mattered. One was the corporate chat, which I promptly deleted. I did not want to see the goodbye and good luck messages from the HR bots, nor did I want to see the panic when it started. The other app was a custom monitoring tool called Ops Heartbeat. I had paid a freelance developer $5,000 of my own money to build it 3 years ago. It bypassed the corporate interface and simply pinged the main server every 30 seconds to check for pulse. It was a read-only viewer. It showed green when the database was healthy, yellow when latency was high, and red when the core logic failed. I set the phone in the cup holder. The screen was a steady, boring green. 2:57. I could have called the bank. I knew the risk officer there, a woman named Sarah, who I had lunch with once a quarter. I could have called her and said, "They fired me. Pause the audit." It would have saved the company. It would have saved the jobs of the kids in that office. But I remembered Evan's voice. "You are an energy vampire. You represent the old Iron Hollow." He wanted to run the company on vibes. Fine. I would let him experience the vibe of a default event. 2:58. The air conditioning in the car began to kick in, blasting cold air against my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. I did not realize my heart was racing until I looked at my hands. They were steady, but my pulse was thumping against my wristwatch. 2:59. I stared at the phone. The little green dot pulsed. 1, 2, 3. Inside the building, 4 floors up. The mainframe was currently waking up from its idle state. It was running a script named Auto Collateral Verify, (XE). It was checking the sum of the inventory records. It was preparing the encryption key. And now, right now, it was prompting the terminal in my office for a biometric scan. Scan request, timeout, 60 seconds. I imagined Evan sitting on his yoga ball, perhaps scrolling through Instagram, completely unaware that a digital gun was currently pressed against the temple of the corporation. The phone in the cup holder buzzed. It was not a normal text vibration. It was a haptic pattern I had programmed specifically for this moment. Long, short, short, long. It sounded like a heavy machine grinding to a halt. It was the death rattle. I looked down. The screen of the Ops Heartbeat app had flashed from green to a violent, strobing red. A single line of text appeared across the top. Critical failure authorization missing. System lockdown initiated. It was done. The domino had fallen. I could still run back. I could sprint to the lobby, scream at Ray to let me in, dash to the elevator, and maybe, just maybe, override the lockout before the secondary safeguards kicked the bank servers offline. I could save Evan from himself. I reached for the gear shift. "Cloud native," I whispered to the empty car. I put the car in reverse. I did not look up at the window of the glass office. I backed out of the space, shifted into drive, and slowly, deliberately, drove away. The digital apocalypse did not begin with a bang. It began with a polite, silent refusal. At 3:01 in the afternoon, 60 seconds after my thumbprint failed to appear on the biometric scanner, the central mainframe executed the logic commanded by its security protocol. It was a simple if-then statement, written 15 years ago by a systems architect who paranoidly believed that the only reason a national director would fail to authorize the daily collateral report was if they had been physically incapacitated or if the building had been overtaken by hostile actors. Therefore, the system concluded that the Iron Hollow supply group was under siege. The error message, authorization missing, did not just flash on a screen in the server room. It cascaded down the fiber optic lines to every single distribution center we operated across North America. It scrolled across the handheld scanners of forklift drivers in Dallas, Chicago, and Newark, like the end credits of a disaster movie. Except these credits were signaling that the show was just getting started. In the Dallas hub, a forklift driver named Hector was trying to scan a pallet of automotive transmissions destined for a just-in-time assembly plant in Mexico. He pulled the trigger on his RF gun. Usually, it would be a cheerful, high-pitched affirmation. Today, it let out a low, grinding buzz. The screen displayed a single word in block letters, "quarantined." Hector frowned, tapped the device against his thigh, and tried again. "Quarantined." He looked up at the supervisor. "Hey, the system says this pallet is toxic. Try the next one," the supervisor yelled over the hum of the conveyor belts. Hector moved to a pallet of raw resin. He scanned it. Quarantined. He moved to a stack of tires. Quarantined. Within 90 seconds, the safe mode protocol had propagated through the entire network. The logic was ruthless but sound. If the central brain cannot verify who is in charge, then no inventory is allowed to leave the building. The system assumed that any attempt to move stock was an act of looting. In Newark, the high-speed automated sorting gate slammed shut with a concussive thud that shook the floor. Drivers who were halfway through the loading process found their dock plates retracting automatically. The red lights above the bay doors, usually green for go, turned a solid, unblinking crimson. Inside the corporate office, the sales floor was the first to feel the oxygen leave the room. Jason, a senior account executive who was trying to close a massive deal with a regional construction firm, was staring at his dual monitors. "Yeah, Mike, I am looking at the stock right now," Jason was saying into his headset, his voice dripping with that confident sales swagger. We have got 4,000 units of the heavy-gauge steel piping in the Ohio yard. I can have them on a flatbed by tonight. Jason clicked the refresh button on his order management screen to reserve the stock. The number under quantity available blinked once, twice, and then flipped from 4,000 to 0. Jason blinked. He typed in the SKU again. Quantity available, 0. Status unknown, risk hold. Hang on a second. Mike, Jason said, his swagger evaporating. My screen is glitching. He stood up. Across the open plan office, 3 other sales reps were standing up at the exact same moment. It was like a synchronized dance of confusion. Hey, why is the Chicago inventory showing 0? Someone shouted. I just lost the entire West Coast feed, another yelled. It says cannot promise on every single SKU. I can see the damn pallets on the warehouse webcam. Jason shouted, pointing at his second monitor where the live feed showed stacks of steel piping sitting peacefully in the Ohio sun. They are right there. Why is the system saying they do not exist? Because, Jason, the system does not trust your eyes. It trusts the chain of custody. And the chain had just been broken. While the humans were beginning to panic, the real assassination was happening in the silence of the cloud. At 3:03, the automated bots from our lending consortium, the massive banking group that fronted our $600 million revolving credit line, arrived at our digital doorstep for their daily price check. These bots were not sentient. They were shark-like algorithms designed to scrape our database, sum up the value of our liquid assets, and calculate our borrowing base. They knocked on the door. The system answered. Show me the value, the bank bot requested. Error, our system replied. Data not certified. Root authorization missing. Asset value cannot be confirmed. The bank bot did the digital equivalent of raising an eyebrow. It tried again. Show me the value. Value is undefined. The bot followed its programming. If the value is undefined, the value is 0. In the span of a microsecond, the collateral backing Iron Hollow Supply Group dropped from $1.4 billion to $0. The risk score on the bank's side did not just go up. It spiked vertically. It triggered an immediate covenant breach alert inside the bank's risk management division. The algorithm immediately flagged every outstanding invoice, every pending transfer, and every fuel card authorization associated with our accounts. Back in the Innovation Hub, Evan Larkin was trying to hold back the tide with a whiteboard marker. He had summoned the executive team to what he called the War Room, which was actually just the collab lounge with the blinds drawn. There was no table, so the VP of Finance, the VP of Sales, and the new culture coach were sitting on purple and orange beanbags, looking absolutely terrified. Evan was standing in front of a glass wall, writing the word breathe in massive letters. Okay, team, let's frame this correctly, Evan said, his voice tight but still maintaining that maddening podcast cadence. We are experiencing a friction point, that is all. It is a digital detox. The system is just pausing. It is asking us to slow down. Evan, the trucks are locked in the gates, the VP of Sales said, his face pale. I have customers screaming that their orders just got canceled by the system. We are losing $40,000 a minute. We are not losing, Evan corrected, capping his marker. We are investing in a pause. I have the tech team looking at it. They say it is just a glitch in the cloud handshake. We just need to manifest a solution. It is not a glitch, the VP of Finance snapped. She was checking her phone frantically. The bank portal just locked me out. It says collateral deficiency. Evan, did we lose the inventory data? We did not lose anything, Evan insisted, though a sheen of sweat was visible on his upper lip. It is all in the cloud. It is safe. We just need to vibe check the server. He turned to the new head of digital transformation, a 25-year-old named Kyle who was wearing a hoodie and looking like he wanted to crawl under the beanbag. Kyle, Evan said, what is the status? I can't get admin access, Kyle stammered. The system locked everyone out. It says it's in hostile takeover mode. It keeps asking for a legacy key. I tried to force a restart. but it just shut down the secondary routing. Evan rubbed his temples. Okay. So it is a permission thing. It is a people problem. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I was on the highway, merging onto the interstate, doing 65 miles per hour. The sun was warm on my arm. The radio was playing a classic rock station, something with a heavy bass line that matched the thumping of my heart. My phone, sitting in the cup holder, lit up. The name on the screen was Evan Larkin, CEO. I stared at it. I did not reach for it. The ringtone filled the car. It was a standard, urgent trill. It sounded like a fire alarm in a library. I imagined him standing there in his trendy sneakers, surrounded by his terrified executives on beanbags, watching the red bars on his dashboard grow longer and longer. I imagined him realizing that culture could not unlock a cryptographic security gate. I imagined him waiting for me to pick up so he could charm me, or threaten me, or perhaps ask me to co-create a solution. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I reached over and turned the radio volume up. "Sorry, Evan," I said to the windshield. "I am currently disconnected from the server." The ringing stopped. He had gone to voicemail. I checked the rearview mirror. The city skyline was shrinking behind me. The glass tower of Iron Hollow was just a glint of light in the distance. Inside that tower, the chaos was just beginning to bloom. But out here, the road was open, the traffic was light, and for the first time in 20 years, I did not have to worry about the 3 o'clock deadline. The system was doing exactly what I had trained it to do. It was protecting itself from people who did not understand it. To understand why Iron Hollow Supply Group was bleeding to death, you have to understand that in modern logistics, money is not just currency, money is blood, and the heart that pumps that blood is not sales, nor is it profit. It is the revolving credit facility. Our facility was with a syndicate of 4 major banks, led by Chase. It was a massive, $600 million line of credit that allowed us to pay for fuel, front the cash for inventory, and cover payroll while we waited for our customers to pay their invoices 60 or 90 days later. But that $600 million was not a gift. It was a loan secured by assets. Specifically, our inventory, every single day. The bank required proof that the inventory existed. They required collateral integrity. If we claimed to have at $1.4 billion in steel and resin sitting in our warehouses, the bank wanted a digital certificate, signed by a verified officer, confirming that the physical count matched the ledger. When my authorization failed to arrive at 3 o'clock, the bank's algorithm did not wait for an explanation. It did not care about Evan Larkin's vision for a collaborative workspace. It simply executed the terms of the loan agreement. Section 4. 2. The covenant. Failure to provide daily collateral certification constitutes an immediate event of default. The reaction was mechanical, swift, and utterly cold. At 3:30 in the afternoon, exactly 30 minutes after the system lockdown began, the bank's automated risk mitigation protocol initiated a liquidity freeze. It was a partial freeze, a warning shot before the kill, designed to limit the bank's exposure until a human could review the breach. The first casualties were the drivers. We have a fleet of 450 long-haul trucks on the road at any given moment. Each driver carries a corporate fuel card. These cards are their lifeline. They use them for diesel, for wait station fees, and for emergency repairs. I was driving past a strip mall on the outskirts of the city when the first domino fell. I did not see it happen, but I saw the digital ripple effects on my phone. I had kept one channel open, a passive monitoring of the public-facing driver forums. It started with a photo, a driver named Miller, who I knew was currently hauling a load of turbine parts through Oklahoma, posted a blurry picture of a gas station pump screen. The screen read, "Transaction declined. Refer to issuer." Underneath the photo, Miller had captioned it, "Anyone else having trouble with the Comdata cards? I am stuck in Tulsa with an empty tank and dispatch is not answering." 2 minutes later, a reply from a driver in Phoenix Mine just got declined at a pilot station. Tried twice. The manager looked at me like I was stealing. 3 minutes later, a reply from a team in Ohio declined here too. I called the card support number. They said the account has been flagged for credit hold. What is going on? The thread exploded. In the span of 10 minutes, the hashtag Iron Hollow stalled began to trend within the logistics community. It was not viral in the way a celebrity scandal is viral, but in the tight-knit world of freight, it was a nuclear detonation. Brokers were seeing it, customers were seeing it, and worst of all, our competitors were seeing it. I sat in my car, parked in the lot of a grocery store, watching the comments scroll by. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. These drivers were good people. They worked hard. They had mortgages and families, and now they were stranded on asphalt islands across the country because an arrogant man in a glass box thought experience was obsolete. My phone vibrated with a direct text message. It was Darla Boone. Darla was the general manager of our largest distribution center in Memphis. She was 60 years old, tough as nails, and had been with the company longer than I had. We had spent Christmas Eves together on the warehouse floor during peak season. She was one of the few people I considered a true friend. The text was short. Daisy, everything is red. The scanners are dead. The gates are locked. And now my drivers are calling saying they cannot buy gas. I cannot get a straight answer from the glass box. They are telling me to breathe. Please, tell me you can fix this. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keypad. I could fix it. I could drive back, storm into the server room, hardline into the mainframe, and execute the emergency override. I could call the bank and tell them it was a technical glitch. I could get the fuel cards turned back on in 15 minutes. But if I did that, Evan would win. He would spin it. He would say that the legacy system had failed and that I had returned to patch it up, proving that we needed to move to his new, undefined cloud future even faster. He would learn nothing, the board would learn nothing, and in 6 months, when the real transition happened without safeguards, the company would collapse entirely, and everyone, Darla included, would lose their pensions. The wound had to be deep enough to leave a scar. The system had to fail completely so that they would understand, once and for all, that gravity is not optional. I typed back, I am sorry. Darla, I am out. They released me at 2:45. I do not have access anymore. I watched the bubble indicator appear as she typed a reply. Then it disappeared. She did not write back. She understood. She knew what released meant. She was on her own. And that silence hurt more than any accusation. At 3:45 in the afternoon, Evan finally stopped trying to manifest a solution and decided to blame the victim. A voicemail appeared on my phone. He had evidently realized I was not going to answer his calls. I played it on speaker. Daisy. Evan's voice was different now. The podcast's smooth jazz tone was gone, replaced by a high-pitched, frantic aggression. I have just consulted with a lawyer. You are currently in possession of proprietary intellectual property. By refusing to answer your phone and assist with this transition, you are actively sabotaging company operations. You are holding our property hostage. If the system is not unlocked in 10 minutes, we will be filing a police report for digital extortion. Call me back. I listened to it twice. Holding property hostage, I said aloud, tasting the absurdity of the words. He truly believed that my knowledge, my memories, and my understanding of the system were company assets. He thought he owned the neural pathways in my brain. He thought that just because he paid me a salary, he had a permanent lien on my expertise. Even after he had kicked me out the door, I was not holding anything hostage. I had simply taken my keys and gone home. The fact that he did not know how to pick the lock was not theft. It was incompetence. I do not work for you, Evan, I whispered, and I am not doing this for free. I was about to put the phone away when the Ops Heartbeat app on my secondary screen flashed a new color. It went from the steady red of system lockdown to a pulsing, violent orange. The text readout changed. Warning, unauthorized admin command detected. Source local terminal 4. Type force reset. All. My blood ran cold. Terminal 4 was in the main IT cluster. That was where the cloud team sat. Evan's new hires. the boys in the hoodies who thought everything could be fixed by turning it off and on again. They were trying to force a hard reset on the mainframe. They did not know that the legacy system had a dead man's switch protocol. If someone tried to force a reset while the system was in lockdown mode without the root key, the system interpreted it as a brute force hacking attempt. To protect the data from theft, the system would not just reboot, it would initiate a defensive wipe. It would scramble the encryption keys, effectively turning 20 years of inventory data into digital garbage. If they hit enter, Iron Hollow would not just be frozen, it would be lobotomized. I gripped the steering wheel. This was the precipice. If they wiped the data, there was no coming back. The company would be liquidated. Everyone would be fired. I watched the screen, waiting for the confirmation. Command pending. They were hesitating. Someone in that room, maybe one of the few remaining junior sysadmins who remembered my training, was shouting at them. I could picture the scene, the hoodie kid with his finger on the key, and someone else screaming. Do not do it. Command cancelled. The status flickered back to red. System lockdown maintained. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. They had backed off. They had realized, at the very last second, that they were playing with a bomb they did not understand, but the damage was already escalating. The fuel cards were dead. The bank was freezing the accounts, and somewhere in a boardroom in New York, the legal team for Chase Bank was drafting a notice of default. Evan had threatened me with legal action for holding property. He was about to find out what a real legal problem looked like. He had broken the covenant. He had shattered the trust that kept the money flowing. I put the car in gear. I was not going home. There was only one person who could stop this from becoming a total fatality, and it was not me. I needed leverage. I needed the one man who cared about the company as much as I did, but who had been pushed out by the board just like me. I turned the car toward the highway that led north, toward the lakes, toward the retirement estate of Walt Hargrove. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting long, sharp shadows across the road. The night was coming, and Iron Hollow was entering it completely blind. I did not drive home to my empty apartment. I did not drive to a bar to drink away the shock. I drove north, watching the suburban sprawl thin out into dense pine lines and rolling hills. An hour and a half outside the city, the signal on my phone dropped to 1 bar, which was a blessing. I did not want to hear the panic. I wanted to speak to the only man who understood why the panic was happening. Walt Hargrove lived on a 300-acre horse farm that sat on the edge of Lake Sterling. Walt was 67 years old. He was the founder of Iron Hollow. He was the man who had hired me 15 years ago, back when we were running the logistics out of a converted garage with 3 trucks and a fax machine. He had stepped down as CEO 2 years ago, forced into a symbolic chairman emeritus role by a board of directors who wanted younger blood and faster growth. They wanted a tech company valuation for a trucking company reality. They got Evan. Walt got a golden parachute and a view of the lake. I pulled my sedan up the long gravel driveway. Dust kicked up behind me, coating the pristine white fences. Walt was not on his porch rocking in a chair. He was in the lower paddock, wearing a grease-stained t-shirt, wrestling with the engine block of a 1970 Ford tractor. He heard my car engine and straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. He squinted against the late afternoon sun. He did not smile. Walt rarely smiled unless looking at a balance sheet that balanced to the penny. I got out of the car. The silence here was heavy, biological, crickets, wind in the trees. It was the opposite of the hum of the server room. Walt walked over to the fence. He looked at his watch, a beat-up Timex that probably cost $30. "You are early," he said. His voice was like grinding gears. "Shift change is not until 5. "I am not early, Walt," I said, leaning against the hood of my car. "I am out." Walt stopped wiping his hands. He looked at me, his blue eyes sharp and unclouded by age. He did not ask, "What do you mean?" or "Did you quit?" He went straight to the jugular, the only thing that mattered to a man who had built a billion-dollar supply chain from scratch. "Did the 3 o'clock publish run?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I was escorted out of the building at 2:45. Walt stood absolutely still. The rag in his hand stopped moving. He looked toward the south, toward the invisible city and the invisible tower he had built. He did not need me to explain the consequences. He knew the covenants better than the bank did. He had written the original code logic on a napkin in 1998. "Who?" he asked. One word. "Evan," I said. He did a vibe check. Apparently, I am too legacy. I block the flow of abundance. Walt made a sound that was half laugh, half snarl. "Abundance," he spat. "He thinks abundance is a mindset. I told the board. I told them he was a decorator, not a builder." He opened the gate and walked through, tossing the rag onto a fence post. "Come inside. Daisy, we need to look at the paper." I followed him into the main house. It was not a showpiece. It was cluttered with books, saddle leather, and stacks of industry journals. He led me into his study, a room that smelled of old tobacco and pine. There was no computer in here, just a massive oak desk covered in physical files. Walt went to a wall safe behind a painting of a hunting dog. He spun the dial left, left, and pulled the heavy steel door open. He pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder. "The board thinks I retired," Walt said, thumping the binder onto the desk. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight hitting the leather. "They think I am just an old man feeding horses, but I wrote the lending agreement, Daisy, and I kept the original copies because I do not trust the cloud either." He flipped through the pages with a wet thumb, bypassing the standard legality until he found a section near the back. It was flagged with a yellow sticky note. "Here," he said, tapping the page with a callous, hardened finger. "Subsection 8, Paragraph C, the Key Person Operational Certification Clause." I leaned in. I knew about the general covenants, the debt-to-equity ratios, the liquidity requirements, but I had never seen the full, unredacted lending agreement that Walt had negotiated with the syndicate 5 years ago. "Read it," Walt commanded. I read aloud. "In the event of a leadership transition, the Chief Executive Officer agrees that no alterations to the core operational verification protocols, including the personnel designated as primary certifiers, shall be made without a 90-day transition plan approved by the Risk Committee and the lending syndicate." I stopped. My name was listed in the appendix. Primary certifier Daisy Wright. "He was not allowed to fire me," I whispered. "Not without a 90-day plan." "It is not just that he was not allowed," Walt said, leaning back in his creaking leather chair. "It is a condition of his employment contract. When the board hired Evan, I made them sign a side letter. I knew he would try to break the toys he did not understand, so I tied his hands. If he alters the operational core without approval, he is in material breach of his own contract, and if he triggers a bank default by doing so—" Walt looked at me, a gleam of predatory satisfaction in his eyes. "He loses his severance," Walt said. "He loses his equity vesting. He loses everything. He is not just incompetent. Daisy, he is legally liable for the collapse." I sat down in the guest chair. The weight of it settled on me. This was not just a wrongful termination suit. This was a corporate execution. Evan had walked into a trap that Walt had set 2 years ago, waiting for the day arrogance would override caution. "He does not know," I said. "He has no idea this clause exists. He thinks he can just disrupt things and apologize later. He is about to find out that banks do not accept apologies," Walt said. He reached for the landline phone on his desk. It was an old beige unit with a curly cord. He did not dial the general corporate number. He dialed a number from memory. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "Evan." "No," Walt said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I am not calling the child who broke the window. I am calling the landlord." He waited for 2 rings. "Arthur," Walt said. He did not say hello. "It is Walt. Shut up and listen to me. I do not care if you are at dinner. You are about to be poor. So listen closely." I watched Walt work. He was a master. He did not scream. He did not threaten. He simply narrated the reality of the situation. "Your boy Evan just fired Daisy Wright," Walt said. "Yes, 2 hours ago. No, He did not clear it. Arthur, check your phone. Check the bank alerts. The 3 o'clock publish failed. We are in default. The fuel cards are dead. The drivers are stranded. There was a frantic squawking from the other end of the line. Arthur, the chairman of the board, was evidently panicking. Stop, Walt commanded. Do not call Evan. Do not put him on this call. If you call him, he will try to fix it, and he will wipe the database. He has a team of children in the server room right now trying to do a hard reset. If they hit that button, Arthur, the assets are gone. The company is zero. Walt looked at me. He winked. It was a terrifying gesture. Here is what you are going to do, Walt said. You are going to convene an emergency board meeting, now, tonight, and you are going to invite me, and you are going to invite Daisy. No, she is not fired. She is an independent consultant now, and she is the only person on this planet who has the encryption key to turn the lights back on. He listened for a moment longer. It will cost you, Walt said. It will cost you a hell of a lot more than her salary. You want the price? We will tell you the price when we get there. Now get the jet ready. We are driving in. Walt hung up the phone with a decisive click. He looked at me. Arthur is hyperventilating. He is seeing his stock options evaporate. So we go back? I asked. We go back, Walt said. Standing up and grabbing a blazer from the coat rack, he brushed the tractor grease off his hands onto his jeans, not caring about the mess. But we do not go back as employees. Daisy, you need to understand this. You are not going back to beg for your job. He walked around the desk and placed his hands on the leather binder. This is a power reevaluation, he said. For 2 years, they have treated operations like a utility. Like electricity, you flip a switch, it works. You do not thank it. They wanted to focus on the brand, on the vibe. Well, the electricity just went out, and now they are going to realize that the brand is worthless if the lights do not turn on. I stood up. I felt a shift inside me. The fear of the afternoon, the fear of unemployment, of irrelevance was gone. It was replaced by the cold, hard certainty of leverage. I want my team back, I said. Darla, the old sysadmins, everyone? You will get them, Walt said. You will get whatever you want, because right now, Evan is sitting in a room wondering why his iPad cannot control reality, and you are the only one with the remote control. Walt picked up his car keys, not the keys to a luxury sedan, but the keys to a dually pickup truck with a trailer hitch. Let's go, Walt said. I want to see the look on his face when he realizes he accidentally fired the CEO. He is the CEO. Walt, I said. Walt opened the door, letting the evening air rush in. Not anymore, he said. As of 3 o'clock and 1 minute, he is just a liability, and we are the liquidation team. We walked out to his truck. The sun had set. The sky was a deep, bruised purple. To the south, the city lights were glowing, but I knew that inside the Iron Hollow Tower, the darkness was spreading. We were bringing the only torch. The interior of Walt's pickup truck was quiet, save for the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the terrified voices coming from the dashboard speakerphone. We were speeding south on the interstate, doing 80 miles per hour in a 65 zone, but nobody was going to pull us over. Not tonight. Arthur Penhaligon, the chairman of the board, was on the line. Usually, Arthur sounded like a man who spent his life smoking cigars in humidors rich, deep, and unbothered. Tonight, he sounded like a man watching his house burn down while standing in his underwear. Daisy, please, Arthur said, his voice cracking over the speaker. We can undo the paperwork. It was a clerical error. Evan got ahead of himself. Just come back to the office. The bank has given us until midnight before they file the default notice. We have 4 hours. I looked at Walt. He was driving with one hand on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. He nodded at me. It was my turn. I am not coming back. Arthur, I said. My voice was steady. I was not shouting. In negotiations, the person who shouts loses. The person who whispers controls the room. What do you mean? Arthur asked. We are offering full reinstatement, back pay for the day. We will even throw in a retention bonus, $5,000. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Arthur, you do not seem to understand the position of the pieces on the board, I said. I do not work for Iron Hollow Supply Group anymore. I was released. My access was revoked. My relationship with the company has been terminated. We can reinstate you, Arthur insisted. No, I said. You cannot, because I do not want to be an employee. Employees can be fired because their aura is the wrong color. Employees are vulnerable. I am not vulnerable anymore. I paused. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, long enough for them to hear the road noise in the background, long enough for them to sweat. If you want my help, I said. You are hiring an external consultant. I have formed a limited liability company called Right Operational Strategies. You will be contracting with my firm. Fine, Arthur snapped. Fine. We will hire the firm. Just get here. We need to discuss the terms, I said. And since I know you have a stenographer on the line recording this meeting for the minutes, I want these terms read back to me before I touch a single keyboard. Name them, Arthur said. First, I said, my rate is 3 times my previous hourly salary, and I require a 6-month retainer paid up front, wired to my account within the hour, non-refundable. That is the price for waking me up. Done, Arthur said immediately. Next. Second, I continued, I want full operational authority. That means I have veto power over any initiative, program, or culture experiment that impacts the warehouse management system or the logistics chain. If your culture coach wants to put wind chimes in the loading dock, I can say no, and my no is final. There was a pause. I could hear rustling papers on the other end. That effectively undermines the CEO's authority, a new voice said. It was Simon, a board member who had been a big supporter of Evan's vision. We cannot have a consultant with veto power over the chief executive. It sets a dangerous precedent. The precedent of bankruptcy is also dangerous. Simon, I shot back, do you want to debate organizational charts, or do you want the trucks to move? Because right now, your fuel cards are declined and your inventory is worth $0. Give her the authority, Walt rumbled from the driver's seat. His voice was low, but it carried perfectly. Walt, be reasonable, Simon pleaded. I am being reasonable, Walt said. Reasonable is fixing the engine. Unreasonable is letting the driver crash the car because he likes the way the dashboard lights look. Third, I said, cutting off Simon before he could argue. The team. Evan fired the sysadmins. He alienated the warehouse managers. I want them back. Specifically, I want Darla Boone reinstated with a 20% raise. I want the 3 junior sysadmins rehired with a 20% raise. And I want a formal letter of apology, signed by the entire board of directors, stating that the terminations were a result of operational negligence, not employee performance. An apology letter, Arthur asked, sounding offended. Daisy, that is excessive. It opens us up to liability. It buys you loyalty, I corrected. Those people are the only reason your company functions. You humiliated them. You want them to work tonight. You want them to come in at 10 o'clock at night to save your assets. You need to beg, and you need to pay. Silence. The board was doing the math. They were calculating the cost of pride versus the cost of liquidation. And finally, I said, the Evan condition. Daisy, we cannot fire the CEO in the middle of a crisis, Arthur said quickly. The market would panic. The stock would tank. I did not say fire him, I said. I know you need a face for the magazine covers. Keep him, let him give speeches, let him go on podcasts, but he is to be removed from the operational chain of command, effective immediately. Evan Larkin is transferred to the role of President of Brand and Partnerships. He will have no login credentials for the ERP, the WMS, or the bank portal. He is not allowed to enter the server room. He is not allowed to issue directives to my staff. You are neutering him, Simon said. You are making him a figurehead. He made himself a liability, I said. He violated the covenants. He tried to run $1 billion logistics network on vibes. I am just putting him in a role where his skill set is actually useful. He can sell the vision. I will move the boxes. We can't do it, Simon said. He is the face of the transformation. If we strip his power, we admit the transformation failed. The transformation did fail, Simon, I snapped. Look at your dashboard. It is red. We need time to discuss this, Arthur said. We can agree to the money, we can agree on the team, but the restructuring of the CEO requires a shareholder vote. It is too drastic. Walt hit the turn signal. We were exiting the highway, merging onto the arterial road that led to the industrial park. The tower was visible now, a beacon of light in the darkness. You do not have time for a vote, Walt said. And if you want to talk about shareholders, let's talk. Walt leaned closer to the dashboard. I still own 12% of this company. Arthur, Walt said, and I have friends who own another 8%. If Daisy does not walk into that building with full authority in 10 minutes, I am not just going to retire. I am going to dump my shares, all of them. Tomorrow morning, the market is open. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the line. You would not, Arthur whispered. It would crash the price. You would lose millions. I am 67 years old, Walt said. My farm is paid off. My truck is paid off. I can afford to lose millions to prove a point. Can you afford a 20% drop in the stock price on the same day? The bank declares default. It will be a bloodbath. Arthur, the vultures will pick the carcass clean before lunch. It was the nuclear option. Walt was threatening to burn his own legacy to the ground just to save it from incompetence. It was terrified silence on the other end. Then, a new voice spoke up. It was sharp, crisp, and female. It was Elena, the general counsel. Arthur, Elena said, I have been reviewing the documentation regarding Ms. Wright's termination while you were debating. Not now. Elena, Simon hissed. No, Arthur. You need to hear this, Elena said. Her voice cut through the bluster. I am looking at the termination email Evan sent to HR. He explicitly states that the reason for termination was, and I quote, a misalignment of vibrational frequency and a legacy aura that depresses the team's spirit. I smiled. I knew he had written it down. He was too arrogant not to. So, Simon asked, it is at-will employment. We can fire for any reason. We can fire for no reason, Elena corrected. We cannot fire for illegal reasons. And frankly, aura is not a performance metric. It is subjective, unverifiable. And in a court of law, a jury is going to look at a 33-year-old male firing a 39-year-old female high performer because of her vibe, and they are going to see age discrimination and gender bias. The liability here is not just the bank default. It is a massive employment lawsuit that we will lose. Evan documented his own incompetence. The silence in the truck cab was heavy. Elena had just handed them the knife. If we keep him in command, Elena continued, we are endorsing that decision. We are ratifying the discrimination. If we move him to brand and partnerships, we can frame it as a strategic realignment. We mitigate the risk. It was the checkmate. Walt looked at me and grinned. It was a terrifying, wolfish grin. Arthur, Walt said, your lawyer is smarter than your board. Listen to her. I heard Arthur sigh. It was a long, defeated sound. The sound of a man realizing he had been outplayed by a tractor mechanic and a logistics manager. Okay, Arthur said. Daisy, you have your deal. The retainer is being wired now. The board secretary is drafting the apology letter, and we will notify Evan of his role change. Do not notify him yet, I said. I want to tell him. Daisy, Arthur warned. Be professional. I am being professional, I said. I need to get into the system. He is currently occupying the physical space I need to work in. I need to clear the obstruction. We are 5 minutes out, Walt said to the speaker. Have security unlock the gate, and tell Ray Caldwell to stand down. We are coming in hot. The gate will be open. Arthur said. Good luck. The line clicked dead. Walt reached over and turned off the speakerphone. He merged the truck into the left lane, passing a confused sedan. Right operational strategies, Walt said, testing the name. Sounds expensive. It is very expensive, I said, but the customer service is excellent. We turned the corner. The Iron Hollow headquarters loomed ahead. The lights were blazing on the 4th floor. The parking lot was full of cars that had not left. They were waiting for a savior. They were getting a reckoning. I checked my watch. 8:35. I had 25 minutes to save the company, and I intended to spend the first 5 of them enjoying the look on Evan Larkin's face when he realized his vibe audit had just bounced. While Walt maneuvered his massive pickup truck past the security checkpoint where Ray Caldwell gave us a slow, grim salute, instead of checking our badges, my phone began to vibrate with the manic intensity of a trapped insect. It was Evan. Having failed to threaten me with legal action, and having realized that his legal team was currently sharpening knives to put in his back, he had pivoted to his default setting, toxic positivity. I looked down at the screen. The messages were scrolling in blue bubbles, a stream of consciousness that belonged in a therapy session, not a corporate hostage negotiation. Daisy, I feel a lot of resistance from you right now. I want to honor that. We are in a friction phase. But that is just where the growth happens. I want to hold space for your anger. Please, pick up. Let's co-create a pathway back to alignment. I care about your journey. I read the words out loud to Walt. Hold space, Walt asked, turning the truck into the executive lot. What does that even mean? It means he wants to talk about my feelings while the building burns down, I said. He thinks if he uses enough soft words, the hard drive will unlock itself out of sympathy. He does not care about your journey, Walt grunted, parking the truck diagonally across 2 spaces reserved for future visionaries. He cares that his stock options are about to be worth less than the paper they are printed on. Inside the glass tower, as I learned later from the timestamps on the server logs and the gleeful recounting of Darla Boone, the scene was devolving from panic into farce. Evan, realizing that his texts were going into the void, had tried to weaponize the Human Resources Department. He physically dragged the VP of HR, a woman named Linda who usually spent her days mediating disputes about refrigerator theft, into the war room. Call her, Evan had ordered, pointing at the speakerphone. Tell her that her refusal to assist is a violation of the employee handbook. Tell her she is not demonstrating a growth mindset. Linda had looked at Evan like he had grown a second head. She was currently holding a tablet that showed the payroll status. Because the bank had frozen the operating accounts, the direct deposit batch for tomorrow morning had just been rejected. Evan, Linda had snapped, dropping the facade of corporate politeness. I do not have time for mindfulness. The payroll account is flagged. If 3,000 warehouse workers do not get paid on Friday, they are not going to have a growth mindset. They are going to have a riot. I am not calling Daisy to talk about her feelings. I am calling the Department of Labor to see if I am personally liable for unpaid wages. Evan had waved her off, disgusted by her lack of vision. Fine. If you won't do it, I will get the tech team to route around her. He had turned to the Innovation Hub team, the group of hoodie-wearing developers he had hired to replace my sysadmins. They were huddled around a terminal, sweating. The lead developer, a 24-year-old named Braden, who had once told me that SQL databases were boomer tech, looked up. I think I can force a credential rotation, Braden said, his fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard that clicked loudly in the silence. If I reset the admin root at the kernel level, we can bypass her biometric lock. It is like hacking the Gibson. Do it, Evan said. Disrupt the blockage. Braden hit enter. He did not know that 3 years ago, after a penetration test showed a vulnerability in the admin reset protocol. I had written a hard stop script. It was a simple piece of code designed to prevent exactly this kind of brute force entry during a lockdown event. The screen did not reset. It flashed a single, bright yellow message. Nice try. Credential rotation blocked. Event logged. Refer to Director Wright. It was a digital slap in the face. Daisy 1, Disruptor 0. It won't let me in, Braden stammered. It knows I'm not her. But the true masterpiece of the evening, the twist that I could not have engineered better if I had tried, was the transparency profit wall. When Evan took over, he had installed a massive 20-foot LED screen in the main lobby. It was connected directly to the financial dashboard. The idea was radical transparency. He wanted every employee, from the janitor to the VP, to see the real-time revenue ticking up, to feel like they were part of the abundance. Usually, it showed a ticking counter of gross revenue, a green number that went up by thousands of dollars every few seconds. Tonight, because the system was in safe mode and orders were being canceled en masse by the automated clearinghouse, the transparency profit wall was working perfectly. It was showing the real-time financial reality. It was a giant, glowing red number, and it was counting down. Minus $200,000, minus $250,000, minus $300,000. Every time a fuel card was declined, every time a customer canceled an order because the portal showed zero inventory, the number dropped. It was a scoreboard of failure, 3 stories high, illuminating the entire lobby in a hellish crimson light. The board of directors, still connected via video link in the conference room, could see the reflection of the wall in the glass behind Evan. "Evan!" Arthur Penhaligon shouted over the video feed. "Turn that damn screen off. You are broadcasting our insolvency to the street." "I can't," Evan stammered. "It is cloud-controlled. The controls are locked behind the admin wall." "You built a billboard for your own funeral," Walt murmured as we walked toward the revolving doors. We stood there for a moment in the cool night air, watching the red light pulse. We were not rushing. We had 20 minutes left on the clock before the bank filed the formal default notice, and Walt wanted to use every second. "Should we go in?" I asked. "Not yet," Walt said, lighting a cigarette. He had not smoked in 10 years, but he kept a pack in the truck for emergencies. "Let it hurt a little more. Pain is an excellent teacher. If we go in now, they will think we are saving them. If we go in 5 minutes from now, they will know we are resurrecting them. There is a difference in the billing rate." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was not Evan. It was a screenshot from the internal Slack channel, sent by Darla. The channel was called General Chat, usually reserved for birthday announcements and lost and found. Tonight, it was a rebellion. A mid-level warehouse manager in Ohio had posted a message. It was short, brutal, and viral. "We did not lose the data. The data is right there. We lost the only person who speaks the language. Maybe next time. Do not fire the translator while you are in foreign territory." Below it, hundreds of thumbs-up emojis were scrolling by. I looked through the glass doors. I could see Evan standing in the lobby, staring up at the transparency wall. He looked small. His posture, usually so confident and expansive, had collapsed. He was hugging himself. For the first time since he walked into my office, Evan Larkin was afraid. He was not afraid of losing his job. He was not afraid of the board. He was afraid because he had finally realized the terrifying truth of the physical world. He realized that vibes do not move steel. He realized that culture does not fuel trucks. He realized that the world runs on systems, on hard, cold logic, and that by removing the person who maintained that logic, he had not liberated the company. He had murdered it. He looked at the red numbers, and I saw the realization hit him. He was not being persecuted because he was a visionary. He was not being rejected because he was at a new school. He was being rejected because he was dangerous. "Okay," Walt said, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under the heel of his boot. "The number just hit minus $500,000. I think they are ready to sign." "Do we use the key card?" I asked. "No," Walt said. "We knock?" He walked up to the locked glass doors. Inside, Ray Caldwell saw us. Ray did not check with Evan. He did not call the war room. He simply walked over, keyed in his master override, and the doors slid open with a welcoming hiss. "Evening, Mr. Hargrove," Ray said. "Ms. Right?" "Evening, Ray," I said. Sorry about the mess. It is all right, Ray said, glancing at Evan, who was now turning around to face us, his face a mask of pale terror. I had a feeling you would be back to clean it up. I stepped into the lobby. The red light from the prophet wall washed over me. I adjusted my blazer, tightened my grip on my laptop bag, and walked toward the elevators. I did not look at Evan. I walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture that had been placed in a fire exit, an obstacle to be removed. Nothing more. Daisy, Evan whispered as I passed. His voice was trembling. I kept walking. I had a system to reboot, and I was on the clock. The elevator doors slid open on the 4th floor at exactly 8:40 in the evening. The atmosphere was not that of a corporate office. It felt like a trauma center in the middle of a mass casualty event. The overhead lights, usually dimmed to a cool, energy-efficient ambient glow to support circadian rhythms, had been cranked up to full brightness. The harsh fluorescent glare exposed everything. It exposed the sweat stains on the shirts of the junior developers. It exposed the piles of empty pizza boxes grease-stained and abandoned on the sleek white tables. And it exposed the sheer, naked terror on the faces of the executive team. I stepped out of the elevator. Walt walked a step behind me, like a bodyguard or an executioner, depending on who you asked. The silence that fell over the room was instant. It was the kind of silence you get when the teacher walks back into the classroom and finds the chalkboard on fire. I walked down the central aisle of the Innovation Hub. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, a steady, rhythmic metronome counting down the remaining minutes of their careers. I passed the sales team. Jason, the loudmouth account executive, was sitting on the floor with his head in his hands. When he saw me, he stood up so fast he knocked his chair over. He looked at me with an expression that was halfway between shame and salvation. He did not say a word. He just stepped back, pressing himself against the wall to give me a wide berth, like I was carrying a loaded weapon. Ray Caldwell, the head of security, was standing by the glass doors of the war room. He had evidently ignored Evan's order to remove me from the premises. Ray looked at me, gave a microscopic nod, and stepped aside. His eyes said everything I knew you would be back. I pushed open the doors to the war room. The smell hit me first. It was the scent of stale pepperoni, cold coffee, and fear, the whiteboard wall, covered in Evan's frantic scrawl of breathe and trust the process. Looked like the ravings of a lunatic. The beanbag chairs were scattered. The air was thick and hot. The ventilation system struggling to cope with the heat generated by the server cluster next door running at maximum capacity. Evan Larkin was sitting in the corner. He was not on a yoga ball. He was sitting on a folding metal chair, his elbows on his knees, his head hanging low. He looked smaller. The expensive blazer was crumpled. The sneakers looked ridiculous. He looked up as I entered. His eyes were red-rimmed. For a second, he looked like he was going to say something, maybe another buzzword, maybe an apology, but the look on my face stopped him dead. The cloud team Braden and his cohort of hoodie-wearing developers were clustered around the main terminal console. They were arguing in hushed whispers, their hands hovering over keyboards they did not understand. "Step away from the console," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a diamond cutter through glass. Braden looked up. He looked exhausted. "We are trying to bypass the root lock. If we just recompile the kernel." I said, "Step away," I repeated. "Unless you want to explain to the federal regulators why you just wiped the audit trail for a $600 million loan." Braden froze. He looked at Evan for support. Evan did not move. "Do as she says," Walt rumbled from the doorway. The developers scattered. They backed away from the desk, hands raised in surrender, retreating behind the yellow tape I had mentally drawn across the floor. "Everyone behind the line," I commanded, pointing to the seam in the carpet where the open office met the executive suite. "Nobody touches a keyboard. Nobody touches a phone. If I see a single screen change that I did not authorize, I walk out, and I take the encryption key with me." The room obeyed. The VP of Finance, the culture coach, the developers, they all shuffled back. forming a terrified audience for the surgery I was about to perform. I sat down at the main terminal. The chair was still warm from where Braden had been sitting. I did not look at the monitors yet. I reached into my bag and pulled out a tangled coil of black cable. It was a serial hardline connector, a piece of technology that looked like it belonged in the 1990s. "What is that?" someone whispered. "That is reality," I said. I reached under the console, found the hidden maintenance port that I had installed 5 years ago for exactly this scenario, and clicked the cable into place. The screens flickered. The modern, bubbly, cloud-based dashboard that Evan loved so much vanished. In its place, the raw command line interface of the mainframe appeared. It was stark, black and white, and unforgiving, and right in the center, blinking in a violent, strobing red text, was the status system lockdown mode level 5. Threat detected, assets frozen. I took a breath. I placed my right hand on the biometric scanner built into the desk, the one Evan had tried to cover with a potted succulent. I pushed the plant aside and pressed my thumb against the glass. The room held its breath. Scanning, the red light on the scanner washed over my skin. It felt like a handshake from an old friend. Identity confirmed, right? Daisy, Director of Operations. Root access granted. A collective exhale went through the room. But we were not done. Unlocking the door does not put out the fire. "Walt?" I said, not looking back. "Time. 8:44, Walt said. 16 minutes to default." I began to type. I did not use a mouse. I did not use a menu. I typed in a rapid-fire staccato, my fingers moving across the keys with the muscle memory of 20 years. Execute protocol Phoenix run. Cleanse logs. Run verify, inventory, checksum, run reconcile, banks. Bank API. This was a script I had written on a rainy Sunday 4 years ago. It was my in case of emergency break glass tool. It was designed to force the system to stop panicking, recount every single pallet in the database, match it against the last known certified value, and force feed that data to the bank's servers with a high priority flag. The screen is filled with scrolling code. Lines of text flew by faster than the human eye could read. Verifying node 1. Atlanta match. Verifying node 2. Chicago match. Verifying node 3. Dallas match. "What is it doing?" Evan whispered. He had stood up and was creeping closer, fascinated despite his terror. "It is doing your job, Evan," I said, my eyes glued to the screen. "It is proving we are not thieves." The progress bar appeared at the bottom of the screen. It was red. Reconciliation progress, 10%. I checked the timestamp. The bank's servers were pinging us every 10 seconds now, demanding an answer. If the handshake failed one more time, the default notice would auto-send. 20%. "Come on," I whispered. "It is stuck," Braden said from the back. "The latency is too high." "It is not stuck," I snapped. "It is thinking, something you should try." 45%. The room was silent. The only sound was the whirring of the cooling fans in the server rack, spinning up to jet engine volumes as the CPU crunched through terabytes of data. 70%. I saw the fuel card integration module queue up. This was the critical link. If this cleared, the drivers could buy gas. 90%. The progress bar paused. It hung at 90% for a terrifying 3 seconds. This was the moment the system bridged the gap between the legacy database and the cloud API. This was the vibe check that actually mattered. 99%. The screen flashed white. Then, it went dark. For a heartbeat, total darkness. Then, a single word appeared in the center of the screen, glowing in a brilliant, beautiful, electric green. Restored. Behind me, a cell phone pinged. Then another. Then 5 more. It sounded like popcorn popping. "My fuel card was just authorized," Jason shouted from the hallway. "The driver in Tulsa just texted me. The pump is running." The bank portal. The VP of Finance gasped, staring at her tablet. "The red flag is gone. Liquidity is available. We are back in the green. Oh my God, We have money. Inventory levels are populating, Braden said, his voice full of awe. 1.4 billion? It is all there. It never left. I sat back in the chair. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. I took a deep breath of the stale air. I turned around. The room was looking at me. They were not looking at me like I was a legacy employee. They were not looking at me like I was an energy vampire. They were looking at me like I had just performed a resurrection. I spun the chair around to face Evan. He was standing there, staring at the screen where the green restored text was still glowing. He looked pale, shaken, and utterly defeated. "You fixed it," he whispered. "How did you do that? It would have taken us weeks to recode the database." "I did not record anything," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "I just reminded the system who owns it." I looked at the clock. 8:47. I had saved the company with 13 minutes to spare. "Walt," I said. "Do we have the paperwork?" Walt stepped forward, placing a heavy folder on the desk next to the keyboard. "Right here," Walt said. I looked at Arthur Penhaligon, who was still on the video conference screen, his face washed out and pixelated, but clearly relieved. "Arthur," I said, "the system is stable. The bank is satisfied. The trucks are moving. Now, before I walk out of here and let it crash again." "I believe we have a contract to sign." Arthur nodded vigorously. Yes, absolutely. Send it over." "And the apology," I added. "And the restructure." I looked at Evan. He flinched. "Evan," I said softly, "why don't you take a seat? The adults need to talk about logistics." Evan looked at the board screen. He looked at me. He looked at the team he had tried to lead with buzzwords. Nobody made eye contact with him. He was alone, slowly, wordlessly. He sat back down in the folding chair in the corner. I turned back to the terminal. "Okay, Arthur, let's process the invoice." "My consulting fee starts now." The green text on the monitor signaled that the company was alive. But I was not interested in the pulse of the server anymore. I was interested in the pulse of my bank account. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I refreshed the page. A spinning wheel cycled for 2 seconds, which felt longer than the entire system reboot. Then, the balance was updated. A deposit from Iron Hollow Supply Group, Urgent Wire, had cleared. It was a 6-figure sum, covering a 6-month retainer paid in full, upfront, plus a consulting initiation fee that Walt had insisted we add at the last minute. I looked up at the video screen where Arthur Penhaligon and the board were watching me like I was a bomb disposal expert who had just cut the red wire. "The wire is received, Arthur," I said, my voice flat. "We are now officially in business. Right Operational Strategies is active." "Thank God," Arthur breathed out, loosening his tie on camera. "Now, Daisy, can we please normalize operations? We need to get a press release out saying it was a technical glitch." "Not yet," I said. "We have not finished the onboarding process." I turned to the terrified HR VP. Linda, she was still clutching her tablet, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. "Linda," I said, "do you have a pen?" She nodded, fumbling to pull a stylus from her tablet case. "Write this down," I commanded, "because this is the hiring list for tomorrow morning, and I want these offer letters sent by courier before the sun comes up." I started counting on my fingers. 1. Darla Boone, reinstated as general manager of the Memphis hub. Her salary is to be increased by 20%, retroactive to the start of the fiscal year. She also gets an extra week of paid time off. 20%? Linda squeaked. "That is outside the salary band for her grade." "Then change the band," I said. "Darla is the only reason your drivers didn't abandon their trucks on the highway tonight. She managed the panic while you were managing the PR. Pay her." Linda nodded frantically, scribbling. 2, I continued. "The 3 junior sysadmins that Evan fired last month, Mike, Sarah, and David, I want them back. Same deal, 20% raise, and a signing bonus of $5,000 each for the inconvenience of being fired for low energy." "They might not want to come back," the VP of Finance muttered. They will come back when I call them, I said, because they care about the system, unlike the people who broke it. I looked over at the cloud team Braden and his friends. They were still standing behind the yellow line I had imaginary drawn. And as for them, I pointed a finger at the hoodies. They are junior developers now. They report to Mike, Sarah, and David. If they have a problem with that, they can leave. But nobody touches the root directory without my physical signature. Is that clear? Braden nodded. He looked relieved. He had realized tonight that he was playing with fire, and he was happy to hand the matches back to the adults. Now, I said, turning back to the big screen. Arthur, the letter. Arthur shifted in his leather chair. Daisy, we drafted it. It is strong. Read it, I said. Arthur cleared his throat. He picked up a piece of paper. To whom it may concern, the Board of Directors of Iron Hollow Supply Group formally acknowledges that the termination of Daisy Wright was conducted without cause and was based on subjective criteria regarding vibes and cultural fit that do not align with our performance standards. We acknowledge that this decision created immediate and catastrophic operational risk. We apologize for the error in judgment. Signed by, I asked. Signed by the chairman and the entire compensation committee, Arthur said. Email a PDF copy to my lawyer and to me immediately, I said. And print a physical copy. I want it framed. Framed? Arthur asked. Yes, I said. I am going to hang it in my home office as a reminder of what happens when you prioritize feelings over physics. I stood up and looked around the war room. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the beanbags. I looked at the whiteboard with the word breathe still written on it in Evan's handwriting. I looked at the kombucha tap in the corner. And one more thing, I said. This room. What about it? Linda asked. This is not a collab lounge, I said. This is the command center for a billion-dollar logistics network. Get this junk out of here. I kicked a purple beanbag. It slid across the polished floor and hit the wall with a soft thud. I want desks, I said. I want ergonomic chairs that support the human spine for 12-hour shifts. I want monitors. I want whiteboards that are used for network diagrams, not motivational quotes. By tomorrow morning, if I see a single piece of furniture that looks like it belongs in a kindergarten, I am billing you an extra operational friction fee. Do you understand? We will have facilities on it tonight, Linda said. We have the old furniture in storage. Good, I said. Then, the room went quiet. The money was settled. The team was settled. The furniture was settled. There was only one piece of business left. Evan Larkin. He was still sitting in the corner on the folding chair. He had watched me dismantle his entire cultural revolution in 10 minutes. He had watched me reinstate the legacy employees he despised. He had watched me turn his innovation hub back into a workspace. He stood up slowly. He smoothed his crumpled blazer. He looked like a man waking up from a long, confusing dream. Daisy, he started. His voice was shaky, but he was trying to find his footing. He walked toward me, hands open in a gesture of peace. Look, I want to say I hear you. I really do. Tonight was a learning opportunity for all of us. I think we can pivot from this. We can integrate your operational strength with my cultural vision. We can be a dual-threat leadership team. He was trying to negotiate. He still thought he was the CEO. He still thought this was a partnership. I did not answer him. I stepped aside. Walt Hargrove stepped forward. Walt was holding a thin blue folder. It was not a thick legal binder. It was a single, terrifyingly thin document. Evan, Walt said. His voice was not loud. It was the voice of a man who had put down lame horses and did not enjoy it, but knew it had to be done. Walt, Evan said, forcing a smile. I am glad you are here. We need your historical perspective. You do not need my perspective, Walt said. You need a lawyer. Walt handed him the blue folder. What is this? Evan asked, taking it. That, Walt said, is a formal notice of suspension of operational authority. Evan frowned. Suspension? You can't suspend me. I am the CEO. I answered to the board. Read the second paragraph, Walt said, lighting a cigarette. He knew it was illegal to smoke in the building. He did not care. Nobody was going to tell him to put it out. Evan opened the folder. He read. His face went from pale to a color I can only describe as ash gray. This says I am in breach of covenant, Evan whispered. You are, Walt said. When you accepted the job, you signed a contract. That contract had a specific clause attached to the bank loans. It stated that you were forbidden from altering the core operational verification protocols without a 90-day review period. You fired Daisy. That altered the protocol. You triggered a default. You broke the covenant. But I didn't know, Evan stammered. Nobody told me about the covenant. Ignorance of the contract you signed is not a defense, Evan, I said, stepping in. It is just more proof that you shouldn't have the job. So, what does this mean? Evan looked around the room, looking for an ally. Arthur Simon. On the screen, the board members looked away. They were not going to save him. They had just paid me a fortune to fix his mess. They were done with the vibe. It means, Walt said, blowing a stream of smoke toward the ceiling, that as of 5 minutes ago, the board voted to activate the Emergency Preservation Clause. You retain the title of CEO for public relations purposes because we do not want to spook the stock market any further. But you have no signature authority. You cannot approve expenses. You cannot hire or fire. You cannot enter the server room. You cannot even order lunch without a countersignature. You are putting me in a playpen, Evan said, his voice rising. We are neutralizing the risk, Walt corrected. You are moving to the role of president of brand and partnerships. You will handle the charity galas. You will handle the ribbon cuttings. You will give interviews about our green initiatives, but you will never, ever touch the logistics chain again. Evan looked at the paper in his hands. He looked at me. The realization was sinking in. He was not being fired. It was worse. He was being hollowed out. He was being kept as a mascot. He looked at me with wet eyes. Daisy, I am sorry. I didn't realize how important the check was. I was just trying to modernize us. I looked at him. I felt zero satisfaction. I felt zero anger. I just felt tired. Evan, I said, stop apologizing. I just want you to know I didn't mean to hurt the company, he pleaded. That is the problem, I said, cutting him off. You didn't mean to. You didn't know. You walked into a nuclear power plant and started pulling wires because you didn't like the way they looked. You didn't know that the legacy systems were the containment walls. I stepped closer to him. You don't know what you broke, I said, and that is why you can't be in charge. It is not about your vibe, Evan. It is about your competence. You are dangerous because you don't know what you don't know. I turned my back on him. Walt, I said, I am going to do a final sweep of the routing tables. Then I'm going home. I will wait, Walt said. I walked back to the terminal. The room felt different now. 10 minutes ago, I was an intruder. An ex-employee crashed the party. Now, as I sat down, the junior developers scrambled to get me a fresh cup of coffee. Linda, the HR VP, was standing respectfully at a distance, waiting for my next command. Ray Caldwell was standing guard at the door, his back straighter than it had been in years. I was not Daisy Wright, the legacy employee who blocked the abundance. I was Daisy Wright, the external consultant who cost 3 times as much and held the keys to the kingdom. I typed in my password. The system welcomed me back. I wasn't back. I had just gone up in value. And everyone in the room knew that from this moment on, every request, every signature, and every decision would come with an invoice attached. The war room was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the cooling fans in the server rack next door, slowly winding down from their emergency overdrive. On the monitors, the cascading red waterfalls of error logs had been replaced by steady, boring, beautiful green text. The system was reconciling. The bank accounts were unlocked. The fuel pumps in Oklahoma and Texas were dispensing diesel again. The crisis was technically over. The patient had flatlined. But we had shocked the heart back into rhythm. Evan Larkin stood up. He smoothed his crumpled blazer, took a deep breath, and seemed to physically reinflate. The terror that had gripped him 10 minutes ago was evaporating, replaced by his natural, Teflon-coated confidence. He looked at the green screens, then at the board members on the video call, and finally at me. He decided, in that moment, to try one last pivot. "Well," Evan said, clapping his hands together once, "that was a stress test, and we passed. I think we should look at this as a successful live-fire drill. It revealed some fragility in the legacy stack. Sure, but it also showed our resilience." He walked toward me, a smile plastered on his face. It was the smile of a man who thought he could talk his way out of a plane crash. "Daisy," he said, lowering his voice to a confidential whisper. "Look, I know things got heated. I know I used some words regarding your employment that felt harsh, but let's not let the lawyers get involved in the messy details. Let's treat this as a misunderstanding. We can frame your return as a consulting partnership, keep it quiet, and just move forward. We do not need to make a big scene about the why of today." He was offering a truce. He wanted me to take the money and shut up so he could keep his reputation intact. He wanted to pretend that he hadn't almost destroyed a billion-dollar company because he didn't like my aura. I looked at him. I looked at Arthur Penhaligon on the screen. I looked at Elena, the general counsel, who was taking notes furiously. "Evan," I said, "you think this is over because the lights turned back on." "The problem is solved," Evan said, gesturing to the screens. "We are green. Let's focus on the positive trajectory." "The problem," I said, raising my voice so the entire room, and the microphone for the board call, could hear clearly, "is not the software. The software worked perfectly. The software did exactly what it was designed to do. It protected the assets from an unauthorized user." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my personal phone. "You said you fired me for a misalignment of vibrational frequency," I said. "You claimed in your email to HR that it was a culture fit issue. You are trying to frame this as a subjective management decision." "It was," Evan said, his smile tightening. "And as CEO, I have the right to curate the culture. Not when that curation involves gross negligence," I said. I tapped the screen of my phone. "At 2:42 this afternoon," I said. "I activated the voice memo app on my phone before I walked into your office. In this state, and under our corporate policy regarding executive termination meetings, one-party consent is perfectly legal. Would you like to hear what you admitted to?" Evan went pale. "Daisy, do not do this." I pressed play. Evan's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the silent war room. "I have been looking at the heat maps from the culture coach, and I have to be honest with you. Your sector is dark. It is heavy. You are too legacy. You represent the old Iron Hollow. We are releasing you, effective immediately." Then, my voice on the recording. "You have 12 minutes before the system thinks there is an intrusion. The 3 o'clock handshake requires a biometric verification." Then Evan again, laughing. "Oh, Daisy, you really need to let go of this narrative. The system does not need a thumbprint to run a script. We have moved past gatekeepers." I stopped the recording. "You were warned," I said, looking directly at the camera where Elena was watching. "You were explicitly informed of the operational risk. You were told, with 12 minutes on the clock, that your action would trigger a security lockdown, and you laughed. You admitted on tape that you ignored a direct security warning because you believed your cloud-native theory superseded the actual engineering reality." Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. Then, Elena spoke. Her voice was sharp, like a guillotine blade dropping. "Arthur," Elena said, "that is the cause." Arthur Penhaligon looked confused. "What?" "Termination for cause," Elena explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "Gross negligence, willful disregard of operational safety protocols resulting in material financial damage. He was warned of a specific risk. He acknowledged the warning, and he proceeded anyway based on personal belief rather than technical verification. That is not a management decision. That is recklessness." She looked up from her notes. If we fire him for cause, Elena said, we do not have to pay his severance package. We do not have to pay for his golden parachute. We do not have to vest his remaining stock options. He walks away with nothing. Evan spun around to face the screen. Elena, you work for me. I work for the corporation. Evan, Elena said. And you just cost the corporation $500,000 in consulting fees and risked a $600 million default because you didn't like Daisy's vibe. My fiduciary duty is to cut you loose. Evan looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He looked at Arthur. Arthur, you can't do this. I am the face of the brand. Arthur looked at the recording of the fuel cards declining on his other monitor. He looked at the apology letter he had just signed. You were the face of the brand, Arthur said. Now you are just a liability. Walt Hargrove stepped forward. He placed his heavy hand on the table. I am activating the operational risk trigger, Walt said. Under the shareholder agreement, Section 10, in the event of a catastrophic failure of leadership resulting in a covenant breach, the major shareholders have the right to appoint an interim CEO immediately. Walt looked at the board. I nominate myself, Walt said. Interim CEO, effective immediately. Until we find someone who knows the difference between a server and a chakra. Seconded, Arthur said instantly. All in favor? Arthur asked. Aye, said Simon. Aye, said the rest of the board. It was over in 10 seconds. There was no debate. There was no holding space. It was a clinical, brutal execution of power. Walt looked at Evan. Evan, Walt said, give me your badge. Evan stood there, trembling. This is insane. You are stealing my company. It was never your company, I said. You were just renting the chair, and you broke the furniture. Ray Caldwell stepped forward. He did not pull a gun. He did not grab Evan. He simply extended a hand, palm up. Mr. Larkin, Ray said. The badge? And the phone? And the laptop? Evan looked at Ray. He looked at the innovation hub he had built. He looked at the employees who were now ignoring him, typing furiously to catch up on the lost orders. Slowly, painfully, Evan reached into his pocket. He pulled out his keycard. He dropped it into Ray's hand. Then he pulled out the company phone. He dropped that too. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were wet. He looked like a child who had been told Santa Claus wasn't real. I just wanted to make this place feel better, he whispered. You wanted to make it feel better, I said. We wanted to make it work. I walked up to him. I stood toe-to-toe with him. You wanted a vibe check. Evan, I asked. This is it. This is the vibe of consequence. Evan flinched. He turned around and walked toward the elevators. Ray Caldwell followed him, a silent shadow ensuring he didn't steal a stapler on his way out. When the elevator doors closed, the room seemed to exhale. The tension vanished. The air felt lighter, clearer. I turned back to the screen. Arthur, I said, Walt is in charge now. I will stay for another hour to ensure the routing tables stabilize. Then I am going home. My team, my reinstated team, can handle the night shift. Thank you, Daisy, Arthur said. He sounded exhausted. We will rely on your guidance for the transition. You have my invoice, I said. Pay it on time. I picked up my bag. I picked up the hardline cable I had used to save their lives. I walked over to Darla Boone, who was already on the phone with a trucking dispatcher in Nebraska. She looked up and winked at me. Nice work, boss. Good to have you back. Darla, I said. Keep them moving. I walked out of the war room. I walked through the open office, past the rows of desks where the lights were bright and the work was real. I walked past the reception desk where the transparency profit wall was no longer red. It was black. Someone had finally found the plug and pulled it. I walked out into the night air. It was cool and crisp. The parking lot was quiet. I got into my sedan. I placed my phone in the holder. A notification popped up on the screen. It was from the system. Fleet routing restored 100%. System status optimal. Then, a second notification. It was from my bank. Wire transfer received $450,000. Available balance updated. I started the car. The engine hummed. It was a mechanical sound, a reliable sound. It was the sound of a machine that worked because it was maintained, not because it was wished into existence. I pulled out of the lot, leaving the glass tower behind. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The system was running, and for the first time in months, the vibe was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed seeing competence triumph over corporate buzzwords, please let me know in the comments. I'm curious. Where are you tuning in from today? Are you listening on your commute, at your desk, or maybe while fixing a system that someone else broke? Let's chat down below. And if you want to hear more stories about professionals taking back their power, make sure to subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story get heard by more people. See you in the next one.